Good evening, Ron Motta here. More than happy to invite you to share the next half hour with us. And the us tonight includes myself and my erstwhile partner, Mr. Chris Pinto, who came all the way from what, Tatnick?
West
Tatnick, excuse me. We got such good response from the last couple of shows that we did with Jay Given. Hopefully you saw them. And basically, it was no more goody two-shoes. It was sort of, let's take off the wrapper and the wraps and let's get down and let's get real. And that's part of what we're hoping to do this evening. Basically, the theme of this show is going to be the woke versus the woken, okay? And our erstwhile executive producer, Chris Pinto, is joining us again. Chris, good seeing you again.
Thank you for having me on.
You haven't changed much since I saw you last, I have to say.
That's true.
That's true. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
But that being said, normally the thing is I tend to waste 2 or 3 minutes of the 28 minutes that we have jabbering. I'm done jabbering. Set the stage.
Let's go to it. So Ron and I are wearing matching Hawaiian shirts that say these colors don't run. We're at a point in the history of this country where people have to stand up and start saying things. Best meme, or meme, as some people pronounce it, the best meme I've seen lately is one that says, all you people that say you're standing for Ukraine didn't even stand up against the school boards for your own children. It seems that we don't fight where we should fight, which is right at home. Mm-hmm. If we learned anything from the Obama candidacy and the Biden candidacy and presidencies of those two gentlemen, it's that they don't care to hide anymore the corruption of the deep state. I always thought, maybe this thing called the deep state, there could be some truth to it. I'm now thoroughly convinced that there's absolute deep state that's running the world. Klaus Schwab in the World Economic Forum is no longer a conspiracy. Klaus Schwab came out recently and said, in 30 years, people will own nothing and they'll be happy about it. And that's how the elitists want the world to work. Yeah. My lower third, my Chiron, that I set up for myself tonight in the control room before I came out here, says Chris Pinto, www.revolver.news fan. You can't read Drudge, you can't read MSNBC, you can't even read Fox News and get the truth about what's going on. You have to go to websites that scour for the real truth, what's really going on behind the scenes, and Revolver.news is one of them. There's another one that some friends of mine are involved in running. It's almost identical to Revolver.news. It has a few different articles. It's called ReliableNewsNow.com. That was a little longer to put underneath there, but you should read it. And I get articles from time to time there that really spell out and articulate in a way that I could never articulate because I'm not a professional writer what is truly going on. So if I don't get taken out by the deep state and the man doesn't come and take me out, we'll probably do 2 shows tonight. The first on this article by Neil Oliver. And we're going to take turns reading this and thinking about it and discussing it. Title is Neil Oliver emphasizes, once you see the weaponized political corruption, you cannot unsee it. So we're going to go back and forth here reading parts of this, and maybe we'll get a nice cadence and get you folks thinking.
And just to kind of position this, the date of this article was March 26th, 2022. So it's very, very topical, very current.
Oh, it's very recent. Yeah.
Just as a positioning.
Yeah, it came out a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And when I saw it and read it, I was floored that someone could articulate so well what's truly going on in the United States and worldwide with the political corruption. So it starts. In his weekly monologue, and there's a link to a transcript in the article, Neil Oliver takes the stories we have outlined on these pages over the past weeks and weaves them into a comprehensive context. Once you see the manipulation and lies from government, you can never unsee them.
However, the opposite is also true. Once you see the truth, you can never not see it. And that sets up a very specific situation. Once you know the truth about a series of events or issues, you can easily see the people who pretend not to know it.
And I think the reason I like Oliver is because he uses metaphors and analogies in his monologues to connect issues to a picture of what they really mean. I try to do the same in writing. Oliver takes the recent information and shows how it is all connected. From COVID madness to the Western government lies that drive us towards war with Russia. It's all connected, and we can see it. And they had a video there with Oliver, but of course we don't have the facilities right now to run a video, and we'd rather have a discussion with you.
Yeah,
so
indeed. Yeah. Sometimes the only thing to do is to laugh, and these are difficult times, made more difficult by the manufactured fear and lies that were force-fed around the clock.
There are issues that must be addressed with the utmost seriousness. But as I say, sometimes you just have to laugh.
The way our leaders and their attendants are going about these things, not just recently, but for months and for years now, reminds me of the behavior of our very young children, toddlers really. Sometimes a toddler will screw his eyes shut in the belief that since he can't see you, it must follow that you can't see him.
You know, and if our leaders weren't applying this strategy in times where decisions made the difference between life and death, their antics would only be hilarious.
Peekaboo, presidents and prime ministers, they spent 2 years on lockdowns, spraying money around like white foam in a 90s nightclub, all the while lavishing multi-million-pound contracts on friends and acquaintances, thinking we wouldn't notice all the new millionaires and billionaires generating unimaginable, unthinkable mountains of radioactive debt that will be glowing red hot for generations to come. We saw you.
They ignored the alarm calls from all manner of reasonable people, from economists of the highest professional standings to just members of the public armed with no more than the experience of running their own households and bank accounts, and piled the debt mountains higher and higher. Some of us told them it was a disaster waiting to happen, and they told us we were cranks and conspiracy theorists who didn't understand how money and economies work.
And what are they doing now? In the short term, they're attempting to launder the consequences of their lockdown idiocy through the tragedy in Ukraine. A shameful sleight of hand. The spiking cost of energy, inflation, the threat of shortages of food, and all manner of necessities apparently had nothing to do with the financial incontinence of the past 2 years. Nothing at all to do with the shutting down economies around the developed world. All of it, we're supposed to accept now, is down to Putin's hellish invasion of Ukraine.
Like that toddler screwing his eyes shut to make the approaching adult disappear, our leaders seem genuinely to think we can't see them, can't see what they are doing. All that they've done these past years, either that, of course, or that they just don't care that we can see them. Because our seeing and knowing no longer matters, not when they think they've got us where they want us. If you didn't laugh, you might cry.
Chancellor Rishi Sunak's wife, Akshata Murthy, is a shareholder in her billionaire father's IT and consultancy business, Infosys, INFOSYS, with a personal stake worth hundreds of millions of pounds. Infosys continues to do business in, guess where, folks?
Moscow. In the past 2 years alone, the Chancellor's wife has apparently been enriched by nearly 12 million pounds of dividends from Infosys.
And Mr. Sunak has urged businesses to sever their ties to Russia the better to strangle Mr. Putin's ability to wage war. This advice apparently does not apply to people in Mr. Sunak's own home. Exactly how stupid and or blind does Mr. Sunak think that we really are?
Don't answer that. Don't answer that. Mr. Sunak is among those of our leaders and senior politicians on both sides of the House of Commons who either genuinely do not know what a woman is, which is to say an adult human female, or else cannot bring themselves to say as much when asked to define a woman. Here's a starter for 10. If you're a living human being, you were grown inside a woman.
Well, this inability or self-serving refusal to stand up with and for women, which is a little over half the population of this country, would be laughable and hilarious if it didn't have tragic consequences, leading as it does to the erasure of women as the living, breathing reality that they definitely are.
For me, it's increasingly hard to avoid drawing the conclusion that our leaders and their little wizards are laughing at us. I say it's high time we pointed out that they are the joke.
And remember when they said the COVID vaccines were 100% effective at stopping a person catching or spreading COVID? Those good old days, right? Remember when they said that those vaccines were absolutely safe for everyone from toddlers to centenarians? And remember when they said we had to wear masks when standing and walking inside a restaurant, but not when seated? Makes sense to me. Remember when they said we had to keep our distance from each other, even our loved ones?
Now we can take refugees of war into our homes. This is a fine and noble act. Of course it is. But why could we not invite our loved ones into our homes then? If it is safe to welcome strangers from thousands of miles away now, a person might be tempted to think it was a fiction all along, a nonsense circulated to make us behave.
Well, that question is anyway redundant because COVID no longer matters. Not as far as I can see. COVID is yesterday's cause of fear and therefore no longer required now that there's a war on. It seems safe to predict that once war is over, the next thing to fear, and for which sacrifices will have to be made upon the public altar, will be along as promptly as an efficiently run bus. My money's on lockdown for the climate. Yes. The outriders for that stunt are already there, of course, with yet more calls to work from home rather than driving into work and leaving the car parked all day Sunday, quote unquote, for the good of the planet.
And I'll just say that one of Ron's favorite sayings is, do it for the children.
The dear, sweet
The dear, sweet children. So now it's going to be for the planet.
Absolutely.
There's a narrative. Sorry for that tangent. War in Ukraine is not the only cause of the mess we're in, but it will bite us all soon. Enough. I can tell you something to fear soon, and that may already be unavoidable. And that's a shortage of food, if not for us, then for millions of others. Russia and Ukraine grow 30% of the world's wheat and 20% of the world's corn.
And developing countries are already facing shortages on account of sanctions. The developed world might have tried to compensate for the shortfall, in other words, growing more food elsewhere, except for the double whammy provided by the West's dependence on Russia as a key source of fertilizer. Western sanctions on Russia's exports of potash, ammonia, and urea, along with other nutrients needed for fertile soil, threaten the growth of wheat, corn, rice, and soy around the world.
The price of fertilizer is spiking. Fewer fields may be planted, meaning smaller harvests. And that's on top of the dizzying hikes in the price of diesel. By the end of the year, farmers may not even be able to afford the fuel necessary to bring in their crops. As the cost of commodities continues to rise in the months ahead, as hunger bites, there can only be more unrest and suffering to come.
Well, of course, those comedians running our country insist we don't need carbon fuels anymore anyway. All that filthy, dirty gas and oil. Yuck. And yet, European countries have bought $19 billion worth of Russian oil and gas since the 24th of February alone. Think about that. We see you. Out of one side of their faces, they talk about the need for sanctions to throttle Mr. Putin and his henchmen and the need for us all to make sacrifices. But out of the other side of their faces, they say, thank you kindly, Mr. Putin, for keeping the lights on.
The upshot of all this is that Mr. Putin's war is paying for itself. He's even demanding bills be paid in Russian rubles instead of American dollars. So the petrodollar will no longer exist. That will really hurt America. That's my own comment there. Other currencies on the rise for dealing in crude oil, so that the sun may be setting on the petrodollar after all this time. There's tragic comedy all over the place. Once you see it, as they say, you can't not see it.
Wow. We normally don't like to tie up a show by sitting here reading stuff. However, what we just read is not stuff. There's a lot more to it. Go ahead.
Yeah. You want me to continue? Okay.
Please do. Yeah.
This is the scary part. This is the guy I mentioned earlier in the show, this Klaus Schwab in the World Economic Forum, that believes in 30 years nobody will be allowed to have any personal property, and they'll love it.
Yeah.
Because the elites will take care of you all you plebes. Okay, and it continues. Klaus Schwab and his World Economic Forum talk about happy plebes owning, they like the same word I do, happy plebes owning nothing, while the richest of the rich hoover up everything of value in the world. I think I know who's planning to be happiest. They plan to take away our money as well and replace it with food stamps. What they call central bank digital currency. Once that's in place, it's up to the banks what you spend, when you spend, what you spend it on, and where. If the bank has reason to think you shouldn't buy that bottle of wine or book that train ticket, then you won't be able to. Let me go on another tangent. There are already many banks that won't do business with people that deal in freedom. By freedom, I mean firearms. Our last hope for freedom is that the American people are armed. And there's already banks that are anti-Constitution, anti-Bill of Rights. Yep. And they won't do business with you, and certain people, if they sell firearms. Then there's the little things like French President Emmanuel Macron.
The Ukrainian President, Vladimir Zelensky, recently appeared on TV in a workmanlike green T-shirt and khakis, and quick as a flash, Mr. Macron had shed his bespoke suits and sent someone to buy some jeans and a hoodie from the boys section of the local haberdashery.
Sorry, let me interrupt.
Go ahead.
Ron had a hoodie on tonight. I brought him a shirt, made him put that shirt on and get rid of that gangster hoodie. I didn't want him looking like Zelensky.
God forbid. Then he had a photographer follow him around at work all day, looking butch and mean. Such antics, such pantomime designed to attract attention to self, while real women and real children are dying, is nothing less than pitiful. Stop. The golden boy of California, the governor, slender fellow, long flowing locks.
The guy who made it legal to poop in the streets of San Francisco while he was mayor.
It's all natural.
It's lovely.
It's all natural. This is a guy that's always seen, with a little tie and, a little preppy boy.
He's wearing a hoodie now, too?
But just about. When they actually dragged his ass out of Sacramento, excuse the phrase, guys, but it's the truth. When they dragged him out of Sacramento and dragged him down to San Francisco and actually had him do a walking tour of both there in L.A. with all the drugs and all the feces, the homelessness, and those are the good things. It's a funny thing. He suddenly was alarmed by this. And being alarmed, he was also alarmed, so alarmed that he actually had like a sweatshirt on, or, he tried to look like one of the guys, like a homeboy. It was amazing to see.
In case you don't know who he's talking about, he's talking about Gavin Newsom, former mayor of San Francisco, when we saw San Francisco decline, and then the voters in California actually made him governor.
Yep. And he, by the way, is related through marriage to Madame Pelosi.
Great.
Very few people know that. But it's
All right, let's continue. Misinformation and manipulation of the truth has been going on for years now. In 2016, the Clinton campaign said Donald Trump had colluded with Russia in order to secure his election. The FBI duly investigated and found nothing. And yet the story of Mr. Trump buddying up to the Russians persisted throughout his presidency, courtesy of the Democrat-fawning MSN, mainstream media, in the States. This week, Mr. Trump announced he was taking legal action against the Clintons and their allies.
Now, before the 2020 election, the New York Post broke the story about Hunter Biden's laptop, the one that he left in a Delaware repair shop, imagine this, allegedly containing emails linking Biden Jr. to bits of money or bungs of money from a Shanghai-based company linked to China. It's claimed there was mention of 10% of the profits for, and you guys have heard this before,
the big guy.
Hunter was already in receipt of $50,000 a month from a Ukrainian energy company for doing, well, no one's quite sure what Hunter was doing other than cashing checks.
And what did the compliant U.S. media do? They rubbished the report. Big Tech shut down the New York Post Twitter account and banned anyone from sharing the story. More than 50 U.S. security experts stood up to say it was all Russian disinformation.
And guess what? The story about Hunter's laptop and those emails, well, guess what again? Last week, the New York Times,
Slimes.
all the information that's fit to print, as they used to tell us,
The slimes.
admitted the emails had in fact been verified.
The technocrats of Silicon Valley just didn't think American voters should know such things in the run-up to an election that their man Joe Biden simply had to win. They call such tactics the noble lie. They're lying, but it's for our own good. But as I say, once you see it, you can't not see it.
And the truth came out about how Trump had not colluded with the Russians. The truth came out about Hunter Biden's laptop. The truth came out about the Wuhan lab leak. And the truth is coming out about vaccine safety and efficacy.
What are they telling us this week? That will be overtaken by the truth sooner or later. The truth seems to be moving faster and faster. As I say, if you didn't laugh at their audacity, at their seeming conviction that we can't see them, you'd have to cry.
So laugh, I say, but pay attention to the truth. There's more truth every day, and the truth, as they say, will set us free. Amen.
Now,
Amen.
that's the entirety of the article, and it took a good portion of our show, but what do you think, Ron? Right here locally, we have people like Joe Petty, who stood in front of a camera and told us, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Damn right.
And he blamed it all on the people that wouldn't take an experimental vaccine. What have we learned?
Which is not even a vaccine.
It's not a vaccine, and it's experimental gene therapy. What have we learned? We've learned that that's completely false. But there are so many people in this world that if it comes out of a politician's mouth, they believe it must be true. Mm-hmm. If it comes through the boob tube, the television set, it must be true. I beg of everyone to realize there's a reason why they call it a news program. Because it is designed to program you. I beg of you all to think about terms that we've all accepted for decades and realize that you've been programmed to believe these terms to be true. In fact, fuels, hydrocarbon-based fuels, are frequently called by everyone on the left, on the right, in the media, in science, fossil fuels.
That's right.
But think about it. The logic is simple. It has nothing to do with dinosaurs. It is the second most plentiful liquid, oil and gas, on the planet Earth. It doesn't take millions of years to regenerate. but we've all been convinced that it is a fossil fuel, implying that there's a limited supply of it. And who did that? The Rockefellers, because they controlled oil when they paid people in the media to spread about the term fossil fuels. Now, the sad part is that medicine is no longer what it used to be before the Rockefellers discovered that you could make chemicals from petroleum. The very first thing they made from petroleum was a product called plastic film. And when they discovered that, it bloomed a whole new industry called the petrochemical industry. Many of our drugs and many of our treatments require petroleum for them to be created. So the next thing the Rockefellers did was to control the pharmaceutical industry. Once they created a pharmaceutical industry that they profited from, all the doctors that used to recommend, natural remedies for problems were ridiculed and made to seem like witch doctors. Does anyone care about you anymore? I went to a doctor every 6 months for a genetic disorder I have, and all he wants to do is make sure I've been taking my prescriptions, and he's going to rewrite my prescriptions. I asked him, how do I get off of these drugs? And he said, I don't think that's the target. It tells you all you need to know about medicine and the world now.
Are they doctors or are they pill pushers?
They're pill pushers that work for the pharmaceutical companies. Wake up, everybody.
Big pharma.
You're being lied to. You're being lied to by big medicine, or the medical industrial complex, as I like to call it, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, the government industrial complex. That's about it.
I think when you look at the programming we've all been subjected to, okay, it really starts to some degree from the pulpit, where they become social warriors. This is what they talk about now. It comes from the teachers. The teachers, obviously, with the unions and locking things in as to how they're going to say things. The parents who have been drilled through the media, big pharma, and so on and so forth. This is why we've got people marching through the streets with masks on now, without thinking about the consequences of it. Very, very sad, but this is why we have Activate Worcester to talk about things like this. Please watch next week. We have some other things that I think are going to be enlightening as well. So for the meantime, Chris, thanks for bringing this to us, and thanks for being here, man. Well done. Good night, and not from Hollywood.